Now, I get people oftentimes quoting the Constitution to me and talking about what the Constitution says. And particularly, I hear from people a lot about the role of the House of Representatives. And I want to talk a little bit about that in terms of our work in appropriations. Particularly the last few weeks, many people have expressed genuine concerns to me about the appropriations bill that passed Congress in December. Unfortunately, many Washington-based special interest groups are confusing the matter of what happened in December with the omnibus bill that we passed with incomplete and sometimes, frankly, false messages aimed more at fundraising for themselves than uniting behind our shared goal of stopping President Obama's executive overreach on immigration. One of the most misleading and commonly circulated suggestions is that the Constitution grants the House of Representatives alone the, quote, power of the purse, giving the House exclusive authority to withhold funding for targeted initiatives. This is not unlike, and I'm going to be reading a part of the Constitution in a moment that relates to this, but I want to read another part of the Constitution that I think often gets misquoted to prove this example. We often hear the quote from the First Amendment, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion." This comes oftentimes from groups who protest Ten Commandments being placed in public buildings or creches being placed on public land. And so they often quote that. But they usually forget to quote the second part of that sentence, which says, "or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." So Congress has a dual responsibility there. It's the same when people, I believe, are attempting to quote the Constitution when it comes to their version of what they call the power of the purse. And as I said, they are, I believe, misconstruing a part of the Constitution, specifically Article 1, Section 7, Clause 1 of the Constitution, which states, "All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives." And I believe many well-meaning people believe that that means the House of Representatives has total control over what happens with appropriations. But they have forgotten that there's another phrase there, and it is, "But the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills." So while the House may pass an appropriations bill, it still has to go to the Senate for the Senate to pass. And as we all learned in civics, the bill has to pass the House and pass the Senate in exactly the same form and be signed by the President in exactly the same form. Now there's another clause that people are often thinking about also. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 states, "No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law." So those two are often talked about as power of the purse, meaning that's what people are talking about when they talk about power of the purse. So, as I said, all bills, including the appropriations bills that pass the House, must also pass the Senate and be signed by the president in the exact same form. So what happened, particularly last year, is the Democrat-controlled Senate could reject a House-passed bill. It could pass liberal amendments and return it to the House, forcing the House either to accept a worsened product or risk a federal government shutdown, which would still not stop the president's executive overreach. So what we did last December was we passed a bill that would fund the rest of the government except for the Department of Homeland Security in a negotiation with the Senate, because we needed to not shut down the government. And most of what was in that bill had already been passed by the House. We'd passed 7 appropriations bills, sent them to the Senate, but the Senate had refused to act. We'd also passed 4 more appropriations bills out of committee, but hadn't taken them up on the floor because they take so many hours to pass. And once the Senate made it clear they wouldn't take any of our appropriations bills, we thought we shouldn't waste additional time. So while H.R. 83 was not a perfect bill, we're all faced here with making decisions on what is presented to us rather than what we would like to be presented. We did have a lot of conservative victories in H.R. 83. It continued our track record of cutting wasteful discretionary spending by $165 billion since FY 2010. But it's no small achievement that the Republican-led House has been able to implement overall spending cuts to save taxpayers more than $2 trillion over the next 10 years since taking the majority 4 years ago. Certainly we want to do more, but we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So we cut back to the Internal Revenue Service to pre-2008 funding levels. We blocked the Environmental Protection Agency from regulating farm ponds and ditches. There was no new funding for Obamacare, and a host of pro-life and conservative pro-gun policy riders were protected in that bill also. House Republicans have worked extremely hard in the past 4 years to stop President Obama and the Senate Democrats from furthering the damage they did to this country when they and Nancy Pelosi were in control. In fact, Nancy Pelosi and Elizabeth Warren both stridently opposed that legislation. However, unfortunately, when people focus on the perfect instead of the good, they don't give credit to us, and we were criticized by the liberal media and the conservative media.